Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bible Talk Live. I'm Bill Rose.
I'm Brian Carey.
Brian, just you and me this week. And,
we missed Doug already.
Yeah. Well, there's three of us, and every time one is gone, and that happens fairly often. I mean, sometimes you're not here, and sometimes he's not here, and sometimes I'm not here. We do miss that third element of our presentation as we talk about it. It just seems to add something more to our discussions, and so it's always fun doing
everybody brings a little bit something different to the table, and so you have a little less table sometimes when somebody's missing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, what you bring, we don't always bring, and what we bring, you don't always bring. But there is that sense when we all get together that we kind of get a complete picture of.
But at least you're here. When I ask a hard question, Doug always says, and to answer that difficult question, Pastor Bill will be giving that answer.
He's just messing with what he's doing. So I can't answer all those hard questions, but nevertheless.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, today we've been looking at James, and I don't remember the title of each lesson. Doug has that. He always goes through that. But we've been looking at the little book of James, and each chapter has something different. And Brian, it's one of the most practical books of the Bible. He deals with practical issues, and that's going to be the case here in chapter 4, where we talk about, and I think specifically he's talking about fighting among Christian quarrels and that sort of thing. And, it's really a very real problem when you stop and think about it. And we're going to try to lay out what chapter 4 says to us as Christians, how we should be, how we should live, what we should do. And he's going to tell us that these things should not be. They should not happen.
This is wonderful. It's one of the reasons I like the book of James too, because of that hands-on thing. Some things in the Bible, and I'm not trying to be sacrilegious when I say this, but some things just feel kind of like these, like this is just some ideology, and I think now I'm going to go home, or I'm going to go to work. How do I actually apply that in my life? And I have to put some thought into that. Like, how do I make that happen? And James isn't like that. He's right there. Like, this is how you do it. This is you going home, going to work, doing your thing. This is how you have to behave, and it really helps you.
Well, I think it does, and it's not philosophical. It's just straight to the point. It uses. I think the very concepts that are found throughout Scripture, but he just brings it all together in a great way. For example, in chapter 1, we talked about how we make it through temptations and trials and all of that. He talked about finding joy in those things, which just goes against the grain for everyone. How do you find joy in those things? So we spent a lot of time talking about that. In chapter 2, we talked about the fact that faith is dead without good works. And what does that mean? Because we're not saved by good works, but good works have to be part of our salvation. And so we kind of work to balance those two things, which is what James does. In chapter 3, we talked about controlling the tongue. And my goodness, I'm going to tell you, that's as practical as it gets when you talk about controlling the tongue. It's one of the most difficult things for most of us. We say things that we should not say, and many times when we should not say them for sure. And so controlling the tongue is an issue. There's not a person alive, I don't think, who hasn't had those moments when they wish they had controlled their tongue and they let their emotions get away from them. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. In chapter 4, which is where we are for today, he's talking about quarrels and fights among God's people. And, your first reaction to that is, God's people surely don't quarrel and fight. If you've never
oh, my goodness.
But the truth is, this is reality, and James knew what he was talking about.
That is something that kind of boggles your mind, and you think about, Christian churches, they shouldn't be, like, it just doesn't seem like that's going to make any sense, but the fact is, when you look back in history, all the way up to today, that happens. We all disagree on little bits and bobs and blow things up all out of proportion. I mean, we and it's just sort of a human nature. Like we'll pick on some other culture for the way they dress or where they comb their hair. Like it doesn't really matter. It doesn't even have to be a big thing. And next thing you
be another culture, right?
Right. This is true. And so yeah, when you get something that we think is importance, like your relationship with God, your religion, and like, well, I think you got this thing wrong, and it's super easy to blow that out of proportion and make that into a huge deal when it probably really isn't most of the time.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And so this is going to give us an opportunity to talk about these things and talk about the reasons for strife and just take a look at what he says about how God sees it all. And I think it's just when I read this chapter, I hadn't read it for a while. It just struck me as being so not only sincere, but also something he had experienced. I feel like he has seen it, maybe experienced it himself, but he's on top of it.
So when is this written? Is this written after Jesus had died and was resurrected and went on to heaven, or this is not during? So, but this is still during the time of the original apostles' lives, right? When this is written,
it is. Most of them were still around, not all, but most of them were still around. This was probably written. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's probably written in the late '60s. I'm not absolutely sure, but it was written a little bit later.
So this is still before the fall of Jerusalem.
Jesus. And so, a lot of the apostles are still around. And so you look at this and you wonder, where is all of this coming from? And so we'll talk about that a little bit as we get into it. So, Brian, you are our reader. So I'm glad you're here, so I don't have to read it. And if you want to, go ahead. I think for today we're going to read 1 through 12, chapter 4, 1 through 12. Are you reading out of the NLT today?
I am going to read out of the New Living Translation, James chapter 4, and we'll start in verse 1.
Okay.
What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want only what will give you pleasure. You adulterers. Don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? I say it again, if you want to be a friend of the world, you make yourself an enemy of God. Do you think the scriptures have no meaning? They say that God is passionate, that the Spirit He has placed within us should be faithful to Him, and He gives grace generously. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So humble yourselves before God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come close to God, and God will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. Let there be tears for what you have done. Let there be sorrow and deep grief. Let there be sadness instead of laughter and gloom instead of joy. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up in honor. Don't speak evil against each other, dear brothers and sisters. If you criticize and judge each other, then you are criticizing and judging God's law. But your job is to obey the law, not judge whether it applies to you. God alone, who gave the law, is the judge. He alone has the power to save or destroy. So what right do you have to judge your neighbor?
Very good. Thank you, Brian. And next week we're going to add on the end. We're not going to do that this week, but we'll do it for next week as we talk about this same passage. You know, when you read this, you get the feeling that James has some very specifics in mind because he talks so bluntly towards someone. And I think these are groups of people. We found out in chapter 1, and I believe, as I was thinking about this, you asked when it was written, I believe James was written early. I said late 60s. I think it was early 60s when he wrote it, late 50s. But yeah, the apostles most of them were still around. And so, they were doing their work out among the people. And he writes this book to a Jewish population, those that were scattered outside of Canaan, those that were outside of what we often call the Promised Land. And so it seems to me, and you see if you agree, that these problems that he's talking about could have been caused even by their Jewish background.
if he's speaking to a Jewish audience, that makes sense. And yeah, when you read these verses, he sounds like he's really trying to fight back some anger. Like he's calling them adulterers because they're not being loyal to God. He's calling them. You're making yourself an enemy of God. You should humble yourself. He's calling them names in different spots here, and it's you'd only, I would think, get that angry if there was some point, if there was some purpose, like you're mad at a situation or a person or something here, and this needs to get corrected.
That's so true, Brian. And over the years with Jewish Christians, their background often became a problem for them. We remember, for example, Peter, when some Jewish brothers came, he withdrew from Gentile brothers and wouldn't eat with them, and all of that. And Paul calls him out in Galatians 2 to his face over that. So there were those problems. There were those Jewish Christians who wanted to hold on to the law. There were some who wanted to tell others Gentiles, that they had to obey the law of Moses before they could be saved. And so there were all kinds of problems that came out of that. Even problems with genealogies and things like that. Who they were and where they came from, who was their ancestor. And things like that. And so and this may not be all the problems, but it seems to me that it's a huge problem among these people. And he starts out with the words, "Where do wars and fights come from among you?" Where does this come from? And that's the kind of question that he's going to answer in just a short time. But he accurately describes strife among Christians with the terms wars and fights. Now, he could have described it, I suppose, in a lot of ways, but that's pretty strong, don't you think?
It is, and I guess I got to ask you, like, if he's writing this to Christian, like the Jews have converted to Christianity, and he's saying things, you want what you don't have, you scheme and kill to get it. Is he saying this literally? Like these are people in the church that are? I mean, is this just an attitude he's talking about? What do you think's going on here?
Well, as I've read that over the years, I think it's kind of I don't think he means it literally. I don't think they were slaughtering each other. I think the fights were, at least with what he says here, were bitter. I think they were severe. But there's a lot of ways to kill a person.
You kill their reputation.
You can. That's exactly right. You can kill their reputation, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as we get on down. But I think that's an important distinction. But I think he's using this kind of euphemistically and talking about other things. I don't think they were actually taking lives. I don't think it had ever gone that far. But nevertheless, it was mean-spirited. And Brian, I thought a lot of people read something like this. Can that really happen among Christians? But I've seen it, and I think you've seen it.
I've been involved. You've probably seen churches split. I'm assuming in your decades of being a pastor, and I've not been immune to that either. I've been through church split, and people who were good friends, and a month later, they're bitter enemies, and they're taking sides and saying terrible things about each other.
Yeah, they become bitter and severe. This could be said in that very context, and maybe these things were dividing churches. Maybe they were dividing churches between Jew and Gentile because the Jews had the law. They continued to keep the law, and that was okay as long as they didn't do the sacrificial parts of it, because Jesus had been their sacrifice. They could keep parts of the law. Paul does that, for example, in Acts chapter 20. He's encouraged by the leaders at Jerusalem to do that very thing. And so it was okay for Jews to continue to keep the law, but they had to know, Brian, and this was the point that was made in Acts 15 when we had the conference at Jerusalem, and in Galatians 2 when Paul talks about confronting Peter because he withdrew from his Gentile brothers. And that is the reality that Jew and Gentile, that we are saved in the same way. In fact, in Acts 15, the point that he makes, and he makes it vividly, what Peter ultimately says is that he talks about Jew and Gentile, and he says, we, talking about us Jews, we shall be saved even like they are, meaning Gentiles. It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't that they're going to be saved like us. It was that they're going to be saved like them, which excludes the law of Moses completely. And so Jesus becomes that denominating factor between them for salvation to happen. And so, but I can imagine that churches, many churches, have both Jew and Gentile in them, especially those outside of Canaan, the Promised Land, and that's who he's writing to, those who are sojourners outside of that nucleus of Jews, and so they were often in churches in Gentile lands that were made up of Jew and Gentile. So I can see bitter rivalries between them.
You can see that would cause certain, like at the nicest cliques, but even worse with you see. Let me back up a second. As you're speaking, it just all these thoughts come to my head, like examples of what you're saying, and you see. As Judaism basically falls apart, because Jesus effectively destroyed it, and by the fall of Jerusalem, you can't actually do it any longer. They don't have the genealogical tables. They can't make sacrifices. It's just ruined,
Right.
and
AD 70,
they can't get it back.
Yes.
But even before then, we see scriptures where he says, some people keep this day holy, some people keep that day holy, some people keep every day holy. They could have kept the Sabbath on the seventh day that the Jews always did, but they didn't. They decided to observe on Sunday in honor of that was when the Lord was resurrected, and so can you imagine just something that important, like you're not even worshiping on the right day, Bill, like what that would have been to those people, because the Sanhedrin and I forgot the name of the words left me. The Pharisees, thank you. The Pharisees, they clung to those laws, with all their might. So that Sabbath was critical to them. They're calling Jesus down because as disciples picked some grain off of a plant as they're walking by. This is massively important, and then other Gentiles are going to come by and not even worship on the same day. I can see how differences like that would really blow things up. It could really blow up a church, and how are you going to have unity in a situation like that?
It really would, Brian. I mean, that's such a good point. And the reality was, as Jews went along, I think they dropped observances of the Lord's Supper just little by little. I think they left it behind. And I think they did that because Christ became everything. He was the fulfillment of the law. So the law was just simply a shadow of things to come. I mean, it was a teacher. The sacrificial system taught about the sacrificing of the innocent for the guilty. And so these things began to fall along the wayside. But again, James is written earlier. And so I think these things are continuing to be a problem for a while. But they are no different than church splits today. I've seen them. You've seen them. And start to say Doug, I'm sorry, Brian. They can be over almost anything that people become bitter and angry, and wars, literal wars, break out, as you mentioned before, with people taking sides.
This is with some of the things. I wish we had some more insight on what he's chastising these people about. He's telling them, you're adulterers, like you're cheating on God because you're friends with the world. Do you think the scriptures, in verse 5, he says, do you think the scriptures have no meaning? He's calling them down really hard. Do we have any idea what the specifics here were, or is this just sort of lost to history?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the history that we're talking about is what we've been talking about with regard to the Jew and Gentile problem. And not only the Jew-Gentile problem, but also problems among the Jews. Because you had Jews who understood, like Paul, that the sacrifice of Jesus was the only thing that was necessary. You had others who were still clinging to the law because that nation had been keeping it for 1,400 years, and so you have those problems among Jews, and so I think that was probably heart and soul of it. But I think for me it's interesting that James didn't get more specific, and I think if he had gotten too specific, if he had talked specifically about Jewish Gentile problems, we would see it as that. It's that. It's nothing else. It's that problem that he mentions. So he leaves it, in my view, a little more wide open, so that any time that Christians go to war and have strife over anything, this applies to what they're saying.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think.
Wow.
Doing it. But listen, we're glad you're joining us. We hope you've joined us before, maybe not if today's the first time. We're just grateful that you're here. We just sit and discuss Scripture for a while, and we're just thankful for that. We are on radio, WFOB 1430 AM, and it actually airs every Sunday morning at 7:56. It's one of the reasons why that we often say at the very beginning, good morning, everyone, because this airs on WFOB early in the morning. We're also on YouTube and Facebook, where you can actually see us. We've never figured out if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you can find us on those things and get us at any time and watch what we're doing and saying. We are at 14455 Campbell Hill Road. Our website is ccbg.life, and we'd love to have questions, Brian. We'd love to have people coming here. If they're listening to us on Sunday morning, they still have time to come if they want.
If you hear us on the radio, you can make it here. Yeah. And there's worship music. Jesus is going to be preached. There's actually pretty good. This is, I think, still a very healing church. People come here, and you become a better man because of your time spent here. That's my opinion.
I think so. We try to be that. Sometimes people come for a while, and then they go someplace else. We're even back to their own church. But we do work with healing people. One of the things that we really work hard to do, Brian, is to make sure that what James is talking about here in this passage in James 4, that it doesn't happen right here at Christ Church.
There's it's one of those other things that's, I think, more advanced theology when you start to dive into church government and how that works. It's off topic for what we're talking about today, but I think it's important in the long run for making sure your church doesn't just go off the rails. A lot of times some churches will pick a pet doctrine that might be a little bit different from the mainstream of Christianity, and the next thing you know, they're all about that, and it kind of distracts from the gospel is really what we're here for. I mean, we can have a lot of disagreements, but if we understand that Jesus is our Savior, then that should cover a multitude of disagreements as well as a multitude of sins, right?
It should. He's going to say that in just a moment. I think that's absolutely right.
Where do we go with this? So, he's really calling these people on the carpet for their disagreements and calling them, effectively murderers and adulterers and liars, and they're jealous. And so do we have any? At the beginning of the program, we talked about how the book of James is very much one of those books where this is where the rubber meets the road, and we can use this information to actually apply this to our lives. So do we have enough information here to actually fix this problem?
Yeah, well, I think there is. One of the things that he says immediately after talking about the wars that they're involved in, the fights, he says, do they not come? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure? So the source of wars and fights among Christians, according to James, is always the same, and the root of it is carnality. It's an internal war within a believer regarding the lust of the flesh. No two believers who are both walking in the Spirit of God towards each other can live with wars and fights among themselves. And so I think what he's saying is that it comes from within me. If I'm engaged in a fight with somebody, I don't care what it's over. Another Christian, we're not governing the world, right? Another Christian, if I'm engaged in a fight with another Christian, it's because of wrong desires within me. And it can be anything, right? It can be, I just simply want my way. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you want in this matter. I want the walls of this building to be green. I don't care if you want them white. I want my way. See, I know that green is better than white is. And sometimes it is that stupid.
Some of the church infighting that you see, and sometimes it's almost a church split is terrible, but sometimes it's all that time leading up to the church split that's worse, because there's this acrimony and bitterness in your congregation, and if that's going on, it's just a matter of time. They've either got to invite Jesus to be in charge again, or they're going to have more problems, and it's just going to be this terrible, uncomfortable situation. And you were there for Jesus in the first place. Why are we fighting over some of these things? And people fight over whether they should have instruments in church or not, or what kind of food you're allowed to eat, or whether you should be able to, have food in the building that you have church in or not. Like crazy things.
It goes on and on. Right?
Yeah, it's a list of stuff that just seems. It's definitely a human condition thing. You see men and their wives will argue over silly things too. Like, they get along on all these major important things, but they'll argue over does the toilet lid go up or down, or did you leave dirt on the sink or something. Like, in the grand scheme of things, this should not affect your marriage, but you're arguing over this like you're going to kill each other.
No,
why is that? And it's just no different.
That's absolutely. It is no different. I mean, we shouldn't live like that in our marriages. We certainly shouldn't live like that in our church.
Amen.
And when you get two people who are spirit-filled, if they're both spirit-filled, it should never happen. And so it makes you wonder, when we do things like that, are we spirit-filled when we're doing something like that? So he talks about a couple of things. He talks about covetousness leads to conflict, when he says you lust and do not have. And then he talks about anger and animosity leading to hatred and conflict among Christians. And so again, James looked back to the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus used murder to express more than actual killing, but also as an inward condition of the heart shown outwardly by anger. What leads to murder most often, I know there are some people who kill randomly, but what often leads to murder is hatred. And so he encourages us not to have that kind of attitude toward others. Don't hate the way the world hates. Don't hate others, because that's what leads to the actual taking of life. And so he's really talking to us about the reality that anger and animosity, first of all, lead to hatred.
So Christianity is really about governing your heart, and that because your heart's going to lead you to those actions, and then the law is really there to say you took these actions. It's more like a reflection of what was in your heart, not you did the right thing or you didn't necessarily break this law. Because what we're seeing here is that there's people that are not necessarily breaking God's law explicitly, but they still have this hatred and war inside their hearts and anger at each other that's going to lead to that.
Yes.
If it was left unchecked.
I think that's exactly right. It's one of the reasons why if someone asks me what church they should go to, my first answer, I don't give them an exact answer, but my first answer is always make sure that when you try a church that they're talking about Jesus all the time. Because I'm telling you, when churches get away from doing that, they stop talking about him, that all of a sudden, all of these things that they get involved in, they're not thinking about him. And that's because they're not talking about him constantly. We do that here constantly, in every sermon, in every class, in every way we can possibly do. We're talking about Jesus, the Son of God. So he goes on to say here, he says, you do not have because you do not ask. And so what he's doing is setting God as the ultimate supreme power that can give us what we need. And then he goes on to say, you ask amiss that you may spend it on your pleasures. And so it comes back to those illicit desires that we often have, that he wants us to get away from and start thinking about others, not just ourselves. Brian, if you want the walls white, I'm okay with that. I'm all right with white. Go ahead and paint them. That's the attitude that we have. So, as we think about this, we're almost done, man. I love Matthew 6, 9 through 10, the Sermon on the Mount. He says, in this manner, therefore, prayer, Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So more than anything, we want you to know that what we want to do is the will of God. We don't want to be in fights. We don't want to be in disputes. We don't want to be in arguments. We don't want to live our lives like that. We want to look to God for everything we need. So next week, we're going to finish this discussion. We're going to have to hurry because we're running out of time even then. Thanks for being with us, and join us next week on Bible Talk.